Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on YouTube, thank you for coming to see us, and please like and subscribe to our channel. I'm joined, as usual, by Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent of the Washington Examiner. And Byron, I want first to address a story about the media. It was the news media at the White House was delivered a very considerable blow, at least one which shocked them this week, when she made it plain that the White House was going to decide who got to cover the pool. Let's have a look at what she said.
As you all saw yesterday, a federal judge denied the Associated Press's emergency motion for a temporary restraining order against myself, our Deputy Chief of Staff Taylor Budowich, and our Chief of Staff Susie Wiles for our decision to remove the Associated Press from the White House press pool for certain and special events. The judge's ruling, upholding our decision to deny the Associated Press such privileged access, reinforces the truth. And it reiterates what I said from this podium last week when that suit was filed. Asking the President of the United States questions in limited spaces such as the Oval Office and Air Force One is a privilege that unfortunately has only been granted to a few. It is not a legal right for all.
Okay, so in her very characteristic way, it was very unapologetically saying, we're in charge, you are not. This follows the expulsion of the Associated Press from the pool and from narrow confines of Air Force One. What are we to make of this, and what was the reaction?
Well, I think most of this, most Americans would see as a tempest in a teapot, not a really big thing. Who's in the pool, who's in the larger press corps, they don't even know that kind of stuff. Personally, I don't think they should have punished the AP for not recognizing the Gulf of America versus the Gulf of Mexico. It's just not that big a deal.
Right.
But there is a bigger theme of what's going on with the Trump White House and the media, and that is the Trump White House is saying the media is a lot bigger than it was many years ago. It is more diverse. Mm-hmm. There are other voices that we, the Trump White House, want to include and give spots to, and that's what we're going to do. So I don't think it's a crazy thing for them to do, and I do think that most of it is just kind of moaning and groaning.
Well, let's talk about the White House Correspondents Association, mm-hmm. which has complained about this and represented it as an attack on the freedom of the press. Yeah. What needs to be understood about the White House Correspondents Association?
Well, first of all, they're the people who put on the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is the yearly dinner. Some people see it on C-SPAN. There's a comedian there, and it usually gets a little news coverage. It was newsworthy in the first Trump administration for Trump not going to
mm-hmm.
it. He didn't
mm-hmm.
go for all
mm-hmm.
4 years, and I suspect he's going to do the same thing this time. And for example, this time, the president of the White House Correspondents Association, Eugene Daniels of Politico, who is now leaving to go to MSNBC, selected a comedian who is absolutely Trump-hating, who said that she hopes that President Trump will not come to the dinner because, quote, nobody wants him there. Mm-hmm. So you think to yourself, does the White House view the White House Correspondents Association as a neutral organization? Right. And the answer is they don't, and so they're not really worried about it.
Well, and nor does the history suggest that the White House Correspondents Association is. The association notably took no position when more than 400 hard passes to the White House were axed by President Biden. It did challenge President Obama when President Obama decided that he was going to treat Fox News as political opposition rather than as a legitimate news organization. This suggests that, or makes it plain, that the last three presidents, the three most recent presidents, have understood the principle and acted on the principle that the White House gets to choose, to a certain extent anyway, who is allowed where.
Yeah, that's just the way it works. It's the White House Correspondents Association. Now, I'm in favor of as much transparency and access as possible. And I think we have seen it off the scale in this Trump White House. I mean, the thing about how many briefings are there, what does the press secretary say, it's almost irrelevant because the president himself is talking to the press every day, sometimes multiple times, taking, I think by now, thousands of questions. I mean, we have never seen a president be this accessible. I went back and looked and found a picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt behind the desk in the Oval Office, and all the old sort of fashioned 1930s press corps is assembled in front of him, asking him questions. And we're having that same scene every day in the Trump White House. Trump is behind the resolute desk, and the whole press corps is there, and they're asking him these questions. So access, I just can't imagine how any reporter would be unhappy with the access in this White House.
Right. You can't be unhappy with what you're actually getting. You can make protests, and that is actually to a great extent revealing. Although I agree with you about the AP and Gulf of Mexico.
Gulf of America. Please.
Gulf of America. That's its official name now. The Washington Examiner has adopted the official name.
You wrote about this. There is an actual board. It's like the National Board of Geographic Names or something, and they've changed the name. So
so that's the official name. That's what we're going to do. That's its official name. It seems like here we are in this country. In this country, that's what it's called. So let's turn our attention to Ukraine, a subject we have obviously discussed before. It looks as though President Trump may have a deal or an outline of a deal with President Zelenskyy for it's a commercial deal. It's mineral rights in Ukraine, and President Zelenskyy could be here as early as Friday, as I understand it, to sign that deal.
President Zelenskyy is going to be coming on Friday. That's now confirmed, and we're going to be signing an agreement, which will be a very big agreement. And I want to thank Howard and Scott for the job you guys did in putting it together. You really did an amazing job. And that'll be on rare earth and other things. And as you know, we're in for probably $350 billion. Europe is in for $100 billion.
So, first of all, how should we read this? What should we think about this deal?
Well, when we've been talking about Trump's plan to end the war in Ukraine, there was one big weakness in the discussion, which is we don't know what the plan is.
Right.
We see him doing things that don't seem to make a lot of sense. He says that Ukraine started the war. He calls Zelenskyy a dictator, says he's got like 4% job approval rating. We kind of figure out, well, what is Trump doing here? A few things are actually coming into view now. And the whole idea of the mineral rights issue is really interesting because it's being portrayed as, I guess, Trump wanting to sort of pillage Ukraine after we, the United States, sent these many, many billions of dollars in military assistance. I think there's more to it than that. If you go back and look at the beginning at the buildup and the beginning of the invasion, the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, there was a lot of talk about Europe wanting to get, about Russia wanting to get Ukraine's minerals.
Right.
I mean, it's a very rich in mineral country. Titanium, lithium, these things that are used in all sorts of electronics, much richer in that sense than the United States, as a matter of fact. So Russia goes to war. One of their goals, maybe it's not their top goal, is to get all of this wealth. Well, Trump's thinking, no, we'll get it.
Right.
We'll keep it from them.
Right.
You know, and the deal is probably going to involve some enormous amount of the mineral wealth being extracted by a combination American, Ukrainian enterprise, and then going to Ukraine reconstruction.
Right.
Because so much of the country, especially in the eastern part, has just been flattened.
Right.
So it will be put to much better use than if the Russians were in charge. So I think that's part of what the mineral thing is about. It also does fit the president's theme, and it goes back to his first administration, that NATO and Europe needs to pay for its own defense. And if we're going to go over and give them hundreds of billions of dollars, they ought to pay us back.
Yeah, some of the minerals some of the mineral wealth of Ukraine is in the 20% or 15%
It is, yeah.
of the country that the Russians have taken. And obviously there are still details to be hammered out. It seems like the Russians are going to keep some of their territory. It's also not clear. It's also been reported that President Trump has agreed to reduce from $500 billion the American take on these things. But these are details that will have to come out. President Putin has opposed European peacekeepers, and there doesn't seem to be an American security guarantee in here. So there's a lot that's still unknown, and which is why I suggest it's sort of more of an outline deal. But to some extent, I mean, we've watched things that President Trump has done. You know, the vote at the UN with
Right.
Russia
Right.
Against condemning Russia for the invasion was a humiliating and frankly, I think, a very bad thing. But at the end of it, if what we're getting is an end of hostilities, an agreement which the Ukrainians are willing to sign and the Russians are willing to sign, with an American presence there because of commercial mineral extraction, that's the thing that's taking shape.
I think, yes, and I think the biggest picture of it, there are supporters of Ukraine who want Ukraine to get all of its territory back, and they include Crimea, which Russia took when Barack Obama was president, and the United States did nothing.
Right.
They want them to get that back. There's been a war in the Donbass going on for quite a long while before the Russian invasion. They want them to have all that territory, and this whole strip, about 20% of the country along the eastern border of Ukraine. And I just don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is Russia will keep some of the land that it seized and took by force, which is something that's happened a lot in human history. Ukraine will get some of that land back. There'll
Right.
be a kind of a deal there. And there will be some provisions to try to prevent future conflicts. And then they're going to stop.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what it is. If you look at the map of the current areas controlled by Russia, you can kind of figure out what kind of deal is going to end this whole thing.
Yeah. Well, that's where we'll leave it. Byron, thanks very much for joining
you.
us. Thank you very much for joining us, and come back next week for another edition of Political Perspectives.